Welcome to Fusion Fiction with your host Madhulika Ra Chauhan, where every tale brings you closer to the heart of life itself. Today we have a very interesting tale. Hope you like it. So without much further waiting, let's begin. The Conundrum. It was a dreary Wednesday afternoon when she walked into the parents' waiting room. And by she, I mean her, the one whose entrance made the other parents clutch their chains in alarm and scuffle uncomfortably as they tried to pretend they weren't staring. Rubina was tall, rather too tall for comfort, and draped in a dress so bright it practically shouted at you. A riotous, eye popping mix of neon flowers and polka dots that made you squint just looking at it. It could have been mistaken for a circus tent if you weren't careful. Behind her trailed a man, an almost invisible man who seemed to blend into the wallpaper, dressed in a dull grey suit that could have been stolen from the lost and found. He looked like he had been made of cardboard, completely unremarkable and the opposite of his wife in every way. Ah, good afternoon, the woman boomed, her voice carrying like a foghorn. I see we're all waiting for our darling little monsters to finish their activities. How delightful. The other parents exchanged wary glances, muttering polite hellos, but not daring to make eye contact with her. She seemed to know she was drawing attention, and in fact, seemed to relish it. Her husband Ravi smiled nervously, like someone who had been just caught in a rather embarrassing lie. I'm just going to step outside for a moment. I'll be right back, he murmured, practically tiptoeing towards the door. Ah, take your time, she called after him. She moved towards a chair, straightening the cushion a little before she sat, her expensive perfume lingering in the air. A fresh breath of jasmine. She surveyed the room with a quiet confidence, checking the cadence of the room. I'm sure all of you are just dying to hear all about my first marriage. The room seemed to stir from slumber. Some parents looked up sheepishly, while others looked like they had been jerked out of an alternate universe. What? Did she just say? Asked one to the other. But she was already talking again, as though she hadn't noticed the collective gasp from the room. She smiled and, with an exaggerated sigh, began her tale. You know, she said, leaning forward with a wicked smile, people always wonder how I ended up with Ravi. I'll tell you, he's not my first husband I had. Oh no, not by a long shot. The room fell silent. They were all hanging on her every word now. My first husband, she paused for dramatic effect. Well, let's just say he was a bit of a bore. Not the exciting type, you know. No flair, no style, just just dull. He was one of those steady as he goes type. Oh, the horror. She dramatically put a hand on her forehead. You'd think I'd die and gone to sleep in the tax office. The parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. She didn't look at the sort who would have married anyone boring. Anyway, she continued, one day after the 50th time I sat through a dinner party listening to him drone about the equity market, can you imagine? I decided I needed a change. I wanted someone who could make my heart race, someone who would sweep me off my feet. She threw her hands in the air as though she had just landed from the heaven. The other parents were starting to look nervous. Was she going to reveal something deep, dark, secret? They couldn't help but listen, even though they were all slightly uncomfortable. There was something unnerving, yet entertaining about her story. I met Ravi at a book club, she said, with a twinkle in her eye. Oh, he wasn't like the others. Quiet, mysterious, and yet. She leaned in so close that others had to lean back. He looked exactly like my first husband. The parents looked at each other, puzzled. What did she mean that he looked like the same man? The same face, the same eyes, the same everything? I couldn't believe it, she said, as though telling a very naughty secret. It was as if I had married the same man twice. But this time, he was more, well, let me say, alive. She gave a wink, which for a moment made the room feel even more like a trap. The air in the room seemed to thicken. The other parents were no longer pretending not to listen. Their eyes wide, their bodies tense, but still no one dared to speak. Now I know what you're thinking. That's impossible, right? You married the same man twice? She giggled, covering her mouth as if sharing a delightful little joke. But oh, it's true, I'll show you. She pulled out her phone with a flourish, swiping to a picture. The parents leaned in, half of them out of morbid curiosity and the other half trying not to be too nosy. The screen lit up, showing a grainy photograph of a man in a tuxedo. His face was stern, handsome, and uncannily familiar. One of the fathers squinted at the image. That's Ravi, he said, pointing at the phone, but younger. Oh, I don't think you're seeing it correctly, she said with a smirk, clearly relishing every bit of their confusion. That's my first husband, and that is Ravi. The same person, just slightly tweaked. The father looked at her as if she had just announced that the sky was made of jelly. You can't be serious. Oh, but I am, Mr. Sharma, she replied with a tone so dripping with mock sweetness. She reached into her purse and pulled out a second photograph, and this time it was a picture of her husband and Ravi standing together. Together. I think you're beginning to see what I mean, she said with a smile that could freeze lava. It's a family affair, really. The room went silent. No one knew what to say. The parents exchanged uneasy glances, their discomfort turning into something darker. Something was wrong. There was a weight to her words now, a strange undertone, something unsettling in the way she watched them all. The silence stretched. The woman stood up abruptly. I'm sure you're wondering how all this works, but the truth is, she paused, eyeing them all with something like a predator's grin. We're all probably related to one another to some degree or another. Don't worry, there's enough for me to go around. The door opened and Ravi stepped back into the room. The parents turned to look at him. He stared back at them, absolutely clueless of the sudden interest they were showing him. The woman's eyes twinkled. Now, she said, turning to the others, isn't this fun? And with that, she gathered her things, winked at the flustered group, and left the room with the son who had just walked in with the rest of the students. Did I miss something? Ravi looked at her and asked as they walked away from the school. Oh, nothing much, remarked Rubina casually, stroking her hair back. Why was everyone looking so shocked when I walked in? Oh, that! I showed them the Photoshop picture of you and I told them that you were my second husband. She smirked. Why'd you do that? Did you see the room when we walked in? All caked up and silent? I just wanted to stir things up. Their eyes met and Ravi saw the twinkle in her eyes, still fresh from her new adventure. He wasn't surprised by her little latest antics. Rubina winked at him. Did you enjoy the look they gave you? She asked. Ravi nodded, resigned but oddly content. I suppose so. With that, we come to an end to this episode. Let me know how you like the story. Share your thoughts with me on social media or write to me at madhulikarachauhan@gmail.com. I'd love to hear your stories too. Don't forget to subscribe to Fusion Fiction on YouTube and Spotify. Have fun until we meet again. This is Madhulika Ra Chauhan and you are listening to Fusion Fiction.